Hello and welcome to this episode of Project Shadow. My name is Charlie. You might know me better as sci-fi fantasy writer C.E. Dorset. And today we're doing another interview because I love talking to some writers. Today I'm talking to Kierra L Rose, whose new book, the oh my goodness, I'm so excited and I'm so behind on my reading that this is probably going to make it to the front of the list because I've heard so many good things. The Healer's Love just came out. Say hello to the nice people.
Hi, how are y'all?
I am so excited, mainly because book launches are insane. Book launches are crazy, and I just want to say thank you for fitting me into your schedule.
No problem, no problem. You are actually a breath of fresh air from all the book marketing. So trust me, you're doing me a favor.
Like, let's see, have I gotten all 1,000 Instagram posts done? And Facebook, why are you rejecting that ad? I own that picture. I made that picture.
Yes, it's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So I heard through the grapevine that this story was inspired by a life experience of yours
Um,
when you lived on an when you
I
lived
did.
on the
Okay, so
island.
the island is based actually off of the island of Guam. I lived there as a military child for 2 years, and so I took the culture of the Chamorros plus the island and mixed it in with the Yoruba people of Nigeria, and we just had a story. That's about it.
So the story takes place on the island of Ikbala, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Mhm.
And what made you want to tell this story? One of the questions I get asked the most is, how do I know that I have a story that will make a novel? How did you know that this was your book to write, that you needed to write this one? Or did you just do it and go, that happened?
A little bit of both. So it originally started off as women's fiction and was supposed to be told from the viewpoint of matriarch of the Bancoli family, which is the last name of the main character. And then the main male character came in, Emiliano came into the scene, and I was like, wait, there is a story here, a romance between Emiliano and Yanda. I must tell it. So the story kind of shifted, and the story had to be told. Like, there were days that I wanted, my brain forced me, like, we're taking a break, this is going to happen. But then my hands were like, no, we're finishing this story. So yeah, I felt like it had to be told. And at the same time, it's one of those, like, it just happened.
I feel like that's the most miraculous part of storytelling, when you find a story that just desperately needs you to voice it, that these characters are almost like living in your head going, please tell our stories, please tell our story, this needs to get out.
Yes.
And I hope that every writer listening to this experiences that at least once in their life. And I don't think it's too rare of an experience if we don't hold onto our story ideas too tightly,
Yes.
because I've had it happen more than once when I don't go, no, I am the writer, I know what is best for you, you shall do what I say, because
Right.
that's when books always go wrong.
Yeah. I actually did try to tell Iyanda's story the way I wanted to tell it. And there were several times me and her came to blows, and she's like, no, I'm telling this story the way it's supposed to be told. I was like, okay, fine, we'll do it your way.
So how would you best describe this book?
I would describe it as, I don't want to say it's a sweet romance, but I do want to say it's a realistic romance with a touch of tradition and spirituality, in that it doesn't follow a formula. It definitely is realistic, and you can feel and see the people. So, yeah.
Spirituality is something that I find lacking in a lot of modern fiction. I got really interested when you mentioned that you mixed in some of the Yoruba
Mhm.
people into this. Is this going to include discussion of the Orishas, or did you create your own pantheon for the characters?
The Orishas are definitely mentioned in this, and you will see on the island where you have some that actually follow the Orishas, and then those who follow Christianity, and then others who don't believe in any of that, and they believe in their own strength and their own strength and their own just themselves, their egos. So the Orishas are definitely the center, I want to say, of all of this. Their names might not be mentioned, but a lot of their aspects and who they are definitely centered into this book.
That's really interesting, because I find in writing, at least some of my modern fiction, I usually try to stick to other world fiction so I don't have to worry about bringing in modern real life too much into the stories, because for some of the stories that I tell, I don't want to get overly political, or I don't want people to think that I'm bashing a group or a faith or something because of my experiences that are coloring the story. When you were writing this, especially with having a multicultural group of people on the island, did you find yourself kind of struggling at all with how you're trying to show each group, or did that just kind of flow naturally for you?
It actually flowed very naturally. I think the only time that I might have struggled is when it was a certain Orisha that I knew off the top of my head, but then I wanted to make sure that I represented them right. However, then I'd come across another Orisha that might have been a little bit better for the situation, and one that I never even heard of. It might have been a lesser one. And then I was like, wait, now I must do research on this one. And then it was a rabbit hole. But other than that, it flowed naturally.
That's something that I find in my own work a lot, when you stumble upon what you think is the answer to the question, and then, oh, but there's this whole world out there that, oh, what about that? What about that? What about that?
Definitely.
Spirituality, I think, naturally fits well into romantic stories, because to me, love is the highest form of spirituality in all of its forms, whether that's our brotherly love one for another, our community love, our family love, or even romantic or erotic love.
Right.
Do you, in your writing, did you find yourself kind of comparing these and having them intimately connected, or
Um, yes, I want to say yes, because as I sit here and think about it, a lot of it was because then I noticed that as I was writing it, a lot of the Orisha's stories weren't only told like from the people, but a lot of the love stories and the myths that surrounded them were told as well. So like maybe a love story between Oba or and Shango might have been told among somebody on the island. So it was interesting to see that.
because having the courage to actually go there and talk about how our connections to one another really relates to the connections that we have with whatever people believe are the powers beyond ourselves is such an important, I want to say, missing component in a lot of modern fiction, because whether or not people believe in things outside of themselves, the connection that we have one to another, be it, like I said before, with our friends, our family, our community, or the ones that are partners, it shows that we, at some deep fundamental level, are connected and interconnected. And one of the things that I've come to love about your channel, and one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on here, is you talk a lot about spirituality and this kind of interconnectedness. It's kind of the subcurrent in a lot of what you say, and I connect to that so strongly.
I'm glad you do. Yeah, I definitely believe that. And even though I'm still on a path and learning that as well, and growing in that, because I'm not gonna sit here and say that I'm like that all the time. There are times where I do slip up, but majority of the time I'm definitely still following that path because I do believe we're all interconnected, especially within. If we can't connect within, then you can't really connect with anybody outside of yourself. So
Oh, you need to say that again. That's powerful right there. I mean, that is the secret to life right there. You know,
yeah,
if you can't connect with yourself, you can't connect with other people
you
or with
can't.
anything else. That's powerful. I love that you said that. I mean, that's some truth right
It
there.
is. It's a lot of truth. Yeah. I try to teach the children that, and I try to teach people that I come in contact with. And I know it's a little hard, especially with the way that the world is and the way that people think. It's kind of hard to be like that in a world like that. But at the same time, I have to remember at the end of the day, I'm the one that has to deal with me. Everybody else can move on with their life. And if I'm not happy with me, then I cannot possibly live with myself nor live with anybody else. So I might be in a fight with a friend. If I still am okay with myself, I know that I can forgive myself as well as forgive my friend or try to make up with my friend. So it makes a difference if you connect with yourself first.
Yes, a huge difference. Um, I've you may have explained this in other places, but you're for anybody who's watching the video who's not familiar with you and they see the TNF there for your name, that stands for the Naked Firefly, which is the
Yes,
name of your YouTube channel.
yes.
I have to I please tell me, where did you come up with that? That is so beautiful.
All right, so yeah, you were not the first one to ask me that, and I actually love telling people this. So fireflies, I actually came up with because I love fireflies. When I was a little girl, and I used to go to Greensboro, North Carolina, to visit my grandmother every summer, she had loads of fireflies in her yard, like to the point that there were times she had to fight me to come back inside because I just wanted to be outside with them. So the first thought when I was coming up with the channel was, well, what is creative to me? To me, a firefly is the most creative being on earth because of the way that even though they're communicating with each other, they're still just, I don't know, just something about them is inspiring. The way that they go through life or the way that they fly. I know eventually they die, but that's beside the point. Um, but the naked came from I wanted to be raw and open with people on YouTube about who I was and what I was going through and the struggles, and to let people know I am not perfect, but I am on this journey and I am trying my best. But the raw firefly didn't sound as appealing, so I had to literally go to the source, and I came up and I saw naked, and I was like, that actually works. And when I ran it by my husband and my son, they were just like, "Yeah, that sounds good." But of course, they side eyed me. I was like, "I'm not going to actually be naked on the screen. Naked is just just another word for like just out there, just
Out,
open up."
just putting it out there. I love that because I identify with that feeling so much. My grandparents lived out basically on the edge of a rice paddy, and so every night the fireflies were so thick, and so were the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
But I would be out there just chasing and trying to catch them and hold them in my hands and watch them light up. And yeah, I can totally relate to that. That's beautiful, and oh, I love that. When you were writing this this new book of yours, let's make sure that we're letting all the people know about the healer's love. Where was this an escape for you, or did you find our modern world and, let's say, our issues that we're facing creeping in?
Okay. That one in particular. Okay, let's see. How can I answer that one? Okay, so when I actually started the story, it's supposed to be about waist beads. So
Okay.
it was supposed to actually analyze how waist beads in the Yoruba culture means to a lot of women, how it represented not only their um, their social status as well as their marital status and whatnot. It represented a lot of things. Sometimes it was certain colors meant healing, and other times, made fertile. So that's what I was exploring. I wrote this book, I say 2017, probably 2016. So there's a scene in there where it talks about a quarantine. And it's funny to me now because I'm just sitting there like, oh, so this really did happen. Um, So it was a way to escape and to analyze the way that a culture was or how they operated and basically escape from the real world because I think a lot of things were happening in 2016, 17 that I was just like, let's ignore. And at that time, North Carolina was going through hurricanes and everything else, natural disasters. So it started off with just a little bit of both. I was trying to analyze the world and how it operated and escape, just get away from it all.
You had what a friend of mine likes to call an accidental moment of prophetic brilliance,
Yeah.
because she likes to say that to me because I just finished writing a trilogy that I was going to rapid release this year that is about a plague that
Oh,
decimates a world, and it felt wrong to release that given circumstances.
yeah. I know that. I know that feeling. Yeah.
So yeah, to make me feel better, I've got a friend that's like, "Don't worry, you were just being accidentally prophetic with that. One day, people will need to cope, and then you can put that that out into the
Yeah.
world." Because that's, to me, writing is an amazingly spiritual experience because we are thoroughly connecting with ourselves. And as Stephen King once put it, it's the closest thing we have to telepathy because we're putting our thoughts onto paper to transmit them into someone else's mind.
You're right.
And so I, I like to have fun with my writing, but I also take it fairly seriously as kind of a spiritual calling in that regard, that I'm trying to tell stories that are going to help other people in some way, as well as entertain. Like the primary goal for me is always to entertain, but you know, making sure that the humor isn't, punching down, making sure that people aren't going after each other. As somebody who has recently been told forcibly by their audience that they are a romance writer and have been for many novels now, um, how I'm still coming to terms with this because I look at those books and I'm like, they're not romance
I know.
novels. Like, they're not romance novels at all. And they're like, no, no, they're romance novels. Like, I once got into an argument with somebody in the, because I'm so good at marketing, in the Amazon reviews, because they kept insisting, I know Charlie says this isn't a romance, but it's a romance book. I'm like, no, it is so not. Like,
Like, okay.
so this is a topic that's really on my mind for those reasons. And so I was wanting to ask you, do you consider this a romance novel or a novel with romance in it? I know it's such a hard thing to say because to me, the Romance Writers of America, this is what I always use on this, says that a romance has to be the primary story,
Mhm.
not a subplot. And for especially for my books, everyone, it says that it has to have a happy ending. Um, sorry for the spoilers on like my entire back catalog, but
Yeah, you just let people know there's no
just
happy
letting
ending.
people know, like, so you've talked about how the love between these characters really changed the way you were writing it. So do you think that changed it into more of a romance novel, or did it just add a very strong romantic element to the book? That's basically what I'm getting at there.
I wanna say whoever reads it, because to me personally, it is a romance. Now, it did have to go through a whole lot of, um, changes to make it a romance, and then there were some scenes that I realized were not even worth putting in there at all. They didn't need to exist. Um, but I've had a couple of people read it who said that it was just a novel with romantic, um, elements in it. But then a lot more people read it and they are just like, no, this is definitely a romance. I guess you can say the book really doesn't follow Western standards of romance. It's more of, you could say, more African mindset of romance, like the ancient ways of romance. So that's why I'm kind of just like, it's a romance, even if it doesn't fit the Western standards of it. It's fine because
I'm continue. Sorry.
I was just gonna say because even if you look at like maybe even some Korean the K dramas, a lot of theirs would not be considered romance. It would be just a show with romantic
That's
elements.
true.
but because it doesn't meet Western standards. However, in their culture, it does. It is a romance. So it just depends on who looks at it and what their eyes at. Me personally, it's a romance. That's what it is. That's what's labeled as.
I'm curious about the reason I kind of lit up when you said it doesn't follow a fairly Western, way of telling a story. I accidentally stumbled into writing Kisho Tenketsu style fiction because I didn't like the way a lot of Western fiction worked, and I was like, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do something different. And I was like, I figured out a new thing, and everybody was like, no, you didn't. You're doing that thing they've done in Japan for 500 years. I'm like, oh.
It's like, well, now I'm doing it.
Now I have a name for it. And it made my day because I had resources now to help perfect what I was trying to do. This is something that I've found very profound in my own writing, where that's the Kisho Tenketsu is more about showing the character's relationship with the world and having their expectations about the world constantly be turned on their head, rather than this kind of Western idea of everybody's fighting each other and there's constant struggle and, banging heads together. And for my own personal fiction, where I try to really incorporate a lot of ideas of compassion and what have you, it just fits my mode better. If you feel comfortable talking about it, I'm really curious exactly how you're approaching story then that is different from our standard Western model.
I'm gonna try to explain it as best I can because I am not that good with spoken word. I can write down quicker than I can, so I'm gonna try my best. Okay, well, with the romance of the Western standpoint, I know a lot of times they're looking for boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy goes after girl, and he gets her at the end, and they're just looking for just. I'm gonna say it, and I know a lot of people are gonna be mad at me, and I don't care. Western romances to me aren't really romances. I feel like they're more of boy meets girl, boy might like girl, boy and girl shack up, do the do, and then they might fall in love and they might get married after just knowing each other for a week or two. Whereas
I know exactly what you're talking about. That's why I don't consider my stuff romance either.
I'm not impressed with that. Whereas the romance that I'm used to hearing, whether it's verbal or reading, it's more along the line of there is a growth. You see the growth of the character. Half the time, the girl is not really thinking about love. She's really seriously thinking about her family and her tradition. And then because she's a traditional girl, you have this guy, he'll come in and he'll sit there and he'll love on her and he'll show her that I am here for you. I am whatever you want to do. Let's do this. But the sex is not the main object, I guess you can say. You're really just looking for that love story. You're looking for the growth of them as a person. You're looking for the growth of them as a couple. And if there's sex, fine, whatever. But then you see the adventure. You see the other characters come into play. You see the other actors and how these actors actually can affect their love story. Because in a lot of love stories, you might have one villain in Western side, and that person's not even really a villain. But if you try to focus on that villain, all of a sudden now it's not a romance anymore on Western standards. Whereas in other standards, it's like, no, that villain is very, very much important. You need to know, why is this character even bothering to even mess with them? Why is he kidnapping her and keeping her? Maybe it's because he loves her, but you're not going to see that in Western culture. If they do have it, it's like one scene, and really from the viewpoint of the heroine. And I know I probably didn't explain that right, but
no, I don't know about the rest of the audience, but I got that. My personal favorite description of love comes from Joseph Campbell, who said that love is the relationship that survives the trauma of realizing the other person isn't who I pretended they were when I met them.
Right.
And that he talks a lot about how real love is this more than an emotion, this connection that emerges once we get past all of that infatuation, all of that projection that we do on someone based on how they look, how they sound, how they remind us of other people. And we realize, oh crap, you're an actual person with thoughts and identities of your own. And that at that moment, that's when actual love can
Right.
start. And
Right.
so that's what I'm hearing you kind of saying there.
Right.
If just to phrase it a slightly different way in case
Right.
you didn't get it. Because that's me is again why I don't consider a lot of what I do to be romance, because I'm so much more interested in that relationship. Because as somebody who has been accidentally married for 20 some years now, I think 22 years, like, and I always word it that way because I wasn't looking to be in a relationship at all at the time, and much less a long-term relationship that would take over my life. The relationship is the part that's so interesting to me,
Right.
and one of the things that is, I keep going back to this what's missing in modern fiction thing, because one of the things that I love about AuthorTube and everything that's going on over there is we're seeing people that are trying to fill niches that they want to read
Right.
that aren't being covered. And we're seeing this a lot in indie publishing where people are filling those niches and trying to get those stories out there. And every time I hear more about your book, it's subtly creeping higher on my list. And
That's a good thing.
no, that is a very good thing. I want to put it at the top. Like, I wanted to have it read before we did this today, but thanks to a conversation that I had with Miss Cachet Warren, I'm currently rereading the Broken Earth books by N.K. Jemisin.
It's fine. I understand. I know. I look. She has me wanting to get those. I'm like, that will be on my next list of books to buy.
Because I had already read them, and then she said some things that made me go, "I am such an idiot. Why didn't I see that when I read the books? I have to reread them now because they're going to read completely differently."
She definitely
And
catches things. She's a good reader. She's an excellent reader.
and Nora is definitely on the top of my list as like great, like she's who I want to be when I grow up. I want to write with the bravery that she has.
Right.
The ability to just sit back and go, this point of view needs to be in second person. I
Yeah.
can't imagine having that bravery.
I can't imagine writing a book like that at all. I mean, I used to read them as a kid, but now as an adult, I'm just like, I don't want to read that. I don't.
Who are some of your heroes as far as writing, and who do you feel, for people who aren't familiar with your work,
Mhm.
if they're fans of, is that horrible comp titles thing that every author dreads the question?
Um, oh my goodness. I actually thought about this when I finished the book. I was like, who would I relate this to? Um, hmm.
See,
Well,
if you want me to vamp for a minute, I can. What you think about it?
go ahead.
Because when I this is one of the reasons why I chat so much sometimes after I say a question, to give people time to consider an answer. When my biggest problem is I read a lot of non-English books, and I know that for the audience that I'm selling to as an English language writer, you're not going to know the names of any of the people that I'm going to mention.
Right.
I mean, I could mention them to you, but you're not going to, the average, English reader is going to have no idea who they are. And so I always just go to a classic that is somewhat close and just go, I don't know, do you like Michael Moorcock? If you like Michael Moorcock, imagine if Michael Moorcock was gay.
Okay, I got you.
Maybe somewhere in there, it's dark, it's spooky, they're people with pointed ears, swords flashing, but with fairies and rainbows everywhere.
I got you.
Blood
Okay,
fairies and rainbows.
definitely got you. Okay, well, first and foremost, if most people are familiar with my channel, Toni Morrison would be the top for me because that she's actually the one that when I was little, 12, I'll say 12, the first time I ever seen her was on a poster in the school. And I was like, wait, I had already read a lot of her books in the library, which now that I think about it, a lot of her books probably didn't need to be in a middle school library, but that's beside the point. Um, I just remember looking at her and just staring at her and like, this is Toni Morrison. I have to grow up to be like her. So I studied her books. And then the only other book that I can think of would be Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. I probably read that book more than any book ever. So it's probably a little bit a mixture of those two, of anything that Toni Morrison ever wrote, plus Pride and Prejudice. And that's just from like a Western size standard point. But if I was to go with anybody, it would be probably a little bit of some Nigerian and East African authors. But first and foremost, always Toni Morrison. It doesn't matter.
The podcast actually has a quite a few, about half of my audience is in France for reasons I don't understand. Bonjour, thank you, hi. So the stories get around. People like a lot of stuff. I'm just lost and flabbergasted at the moment because I'm imagining Toni Morrison's Pride and Prejudice and trying to figure out what that book would look like in my head.
Right. It's because somebody read it and they were just like, it had like the essence of like Toni Morrison, and I was just like, I can see that. But then like there's a little bit like you might see some things, might see some Maya Angelou in there, you might see some Alice Walker, but not a lot, because I mean they influenced me as well. But it was definitely Pride and Prejudice and anything Toni Morrison wrote. And then of course some myths and legends and other things from over there in Africa. So it's just like put those together and you don't know what you might get.
So if you would like to read Toni Morrison's version of Pride and Prejudice, check out The Healer's Love by Kierra L Rose, because now, I think you're going to interrupt my reread of a series to get into this now a little bit sooner. So your book is out now?
Yes, it is out now. It's anywhere the books are sold, whether it's ebook or paperback. There is a hardcover that will be coming out at the end of August. So Barnes & Noble will be selling that one, and I'm sure I'm going to have it on my website as well. I'm trying to actually update my website so that if people want signed copies, they can do that as well.
Oh, signed copies. That's something that I've done a couple times, because book signings.
Yeah, I mean, like right now, though, I'm like, you just stole this moment from me, quarantine.
Oh, tell me. Well, I don't know. That's a matter that is an ecumenical matter. I have had both some glorious experiences doing book signings, in-person book signings, and let's just say somebody bought a copy of one of my books, sent it to Theodore Kaczynski in prison, and got a fan letter back from him and got mad that I wouldn't accept a letter from him.
Oh, okay then.
Because I ain't taking no mail from the Unabomber. I'm sorry. That's not happening. That's not happening.
I will not be. Nope, I do not know him. I'm not.
Nope. No. Like, I don't know what you're thinking. Like, I'm glad Teddy K liked the book. That's wonderful. That means I'm not on the enemy's list should he ever get out. But I don't want mail.
I do not want to say that I'm connected. Yeah, I understand. I got you.
Because I've had some weird experiences with in-person book signings. But that's a whole show in and of itself. I want to thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me. If there's anything else you would like to promote or anywhere that you would like to tell people to go look at you, now's the time.
I was about to say you can check me out on Instagram under Kierra L Rose, as well as on Facebook under Kierra L Rose, and Twitter too, Kierra L Rose. And if you want to, you can always check out my channel, The Naked Firefly, or sign up for my newsletter, Kierra L Rose. And that's about it.
And here, let's just put that on the screen again in case, come on now. Where'd it go? Of course, there we go. In case you forgot how to spell it or need to know, there's the book. Go get the book. Well, let's end this episode the way we always do on this show, at least since I got to the point where I just had to just say something. Remember, everyone out there, things have not changed. Things have not gotten better. We have so much more work to do. As always, as I end all of my episodes and all of our videos, Black Lives Matter. Black trans lives matter. There is work to do. Find some way to reach out. I know I just got a letter from my personal congressman telling me how this movement is threatening the American family.
Okay.
And if I disappear from the internet, I wrote a letter back to him.
Okay.
So if I disappear, now you know what happened
Exactly.
because that set me off a little bit. So
I can imagine. Oh my goodness.
yeah,
Mm.
speak out, let your voice be heard. We can change the world if we all work together. And as always, I hope you all have the fun. Until next time, bye.
Bye.